UIC.
Freedom and people of
Hell yeah.
freedom and people of need. Yeah, yeah. Freedom and people of want. Freedom and people of need. Yeah, yeah. Freedom and people of want. Freedom and people of need. Yeah, yeah. Freedom and people of want. Freedom and people of need. Yeah,
Yeah. Real man a road. Now bow wolf in a tree grand a road. Now bow down to no demon a road. UIC when you see man a road, me say yeah. Real man a road. Now bow wolf in a tree grand a road. Now bow down to no demon a road. UIC when you see man a road. Ready for broke every chain. That when they free up the people.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of UIC TV. I'm hoping tonight that we can succeed in connecting. So I'm trying to see if we can get on. Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. Let me know if you can hear me clearly tonight and if you can see me clearly. Can you hear me clearly? Let me know. Mic check, mic check. 1, 2, 3. Good night, good night. Can you hear me? Good night, JNH, and good night. Wow, turn up the mic. So the mic is low. You see her. The mic is low again. You can't hear me clearly. Even if you can hear me clearly. Can you hear me clearly? Maybe there. Can you hear me clearly? Let me know if you can hear me clearly this time around. While I am. Can you hear me clearly? Mic check. Welcome, Michelle Clark. Good to have you on. Let me see if I can get this thing here up and working. Let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear me clearly, everyone? Can you hear me clearly? Loud and clear. Oh, the sound is muffled. All right. Let me see here. How is that? Any better? Is that any better? Wonderful. So Michelle Clark says she can hear me clearly. So that's good. Wonderful. So tonight we're going to try again to talk about inflation. I'm going to try to explain what's happening with the prices that we're seeing. But before we do that, you all are aware of the tragic deaths that have been happening over the last 24 hours. Something is seriously wrong. Our country is in a serious dilemma right now because government is unable to perform its most basic task. There's no other reason for government than to keep us safe. There's no greater reason for government than to keep us safe. And our government is taking 45% of GDP. They're taking almost 50% of our GDP, and they're unable to keep us safe. Now, something is seriously wrong with that picture. But that's not the subject for tonight. The subject for tonight is the government inflation scam. And I really want to walk you through this scam because it's very important that you understand it. And when you do understand what is causing inflation, you should be very upset and you should want to change the system of governance urgently to stop that from happening. So I want to begin by what I did last night by talking about just defining for you some key things, money versus currency. I want to explain that and so on. But let me just welcome Mr. Douglas Harper. Good to see you on. Good evening, Mr. Harper. And good evening to all of you who are joining on different platforms. Please share the live, share with your friends, your family, all the people you know, so that they can participate in this learning exercise. And Dennis Art says, love you, teach. Wish you come on every day. I wish I could too, but my time is very limited. But tonight we're going to learn about inflation. I'm reminded of a story. I used to do some work for a group of companies, and one of my tasks when I was at that working with that group of companies was to employ accounting staff for them. And I had this young lady who came in from the University of the West Indies, applying for one of the accounting clerks position. She she really was proud of the fact that she had an economics degree from the University of the West Indies. And so I asked her the question, as part of the interview. I mean, she seemed a bit cocky and overconfident. So I asked her the question. I asked her, what what is inflation? And she said, inflation is the rise in prices. And then I asked her, what causes the rise in prices? And she replied, inflation. I thought that she didn't understand quite clearly the question. So I asked her again, what is inflation? And she said, inflation is a rise in prices. And I asked her, what is the cause of the rise in prices? And she got very irritated in the interview. She snapped at me and she says, inflation. So this was a university graduate. So I want you to know that if you are sitting there right now and you don't know the answer to that question, don't feel too bad, because a Jamaican student who passed CXC accounts, Cape economics, and went to university and completed an undergraduate degree in economics could not define inflation properly. But tonight when we're finished, you should have a very clear understanding of inflation. So let's begin. I'm going to start this session off with a video. I'm going to pause at different points throughout the video. And then after it's finished, I'm going to walk you through from the top again, just to capture the main points so that it sticks in your mind. Okay? So let's begin. And let me know if you're not hearing me or if the video becomes cracky or anything. So let's see if we can do this now. I'm going to try to share this with you. So let me try to share my screen here. And then we're going to go through this in, step by step. So here we go. Can you see that? Wonderful. So let's begin now to have a look. Now, by the way, I should tell you something about this video before I show it. This video was done about 10 years ago. So it's not a very current video, but everything in that video is very relevant to today. And the purpose of the video that you're going to see, the person who made it, I mean, he had an ulterior motive as well. His motive is really to get you to buy into the idea that you need to buy into silver and gold as an edge against bad money, okay, or against inflation. But I don't want you to get carried away with the talk about gold as the answer, because gold is not the answer. But I do understand the value he's making or the point he's making about gold. So please do not take that too to heart. Don't believe you need to rush out now and buy gold or silver. Nothing is wrong with buying gold or silver, but I don't think you would have understood it enough to form a solid understanding to then choose to buy gold or silver. So don't get carried away with that. Focus on the explanation that he's giving about the subject, and prepare your mind now to have a discussion with me about that. All right? So let's see if we can get that done now. Let's begin.
Your true wealth is your time and freedom. Money is just a tool for trading your time. It's a container to store your economic energy until you're ready to deploy it. But the whole world has been turned away from real money and has been fooled into using currency. A deceitful imposter that is silently stealing your two most valuable assets, your time and your freedom. Welcome to the rabbit hole.
We are entering a period of financial crisis that is the greatest the world has ever known. The wealth transfer that will take place during this decade is the greatest wealth transfer in history. Wealth is never destroyed, it is merely transferred, and that means that on the opposite side of every crisis there is an opportunity. The great news is that all you have to do to turn this crisis into your great opportunity is to educate yourself. I believe that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is your own education. Education on the history of money, education on finance, education on how the global economy works, education on how all of these guys, the central bankers, the stock market, how they can cheat you, how they can scam you. If you learn what is going on and how the financial world works, you can put yourself on the correct side of this wealth transfer. Winston Churchill once said that the further you look into the past, the further that you can see into the future. This program is all about creating your own crystal ball, being able to gaze into the future, being able to change this crisis, the greatest crisis in the history of mankind, into your great opportunity. The hidden secrets of money, some of them are hidden in plain sight. They're like right in front of you. The way the monetary system works is something that isn't actually hidden away from all of us. It's out in the open, but it's complex and people just they can't see how it works. It's hard for them to imagine that we're living in such a hoax. Others are meant to be secret, but the truth is slowly coming out, like the Federal Reserve being a private corporation and not really part of the US government. But when I started studying this, what I found was that there was no place that I could point people to where they could get it all in one spot. And so I basically decided to write my book about it and consolidate monetary history, economics, the markets, fundamentals of gold and silver. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in economics, and I've sort of made it my job to lift the fog for people. Welcome to Egypt. This is where it all began. Roughly 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians started using gold and silver as their predominant form of currency. But it was not yet money. The pieces of gold and silver that they were using were odd sizes and weights, odd purities, so it still was not interchangeable, where each unit is the same as the next. This meant that nothing really had a price yet. You couldn't put a price of so many coins on something because they didn't have coins yet. Trade was still difficult. It was still a guessing game when it came to the exchange of values. One of the reasons that we are in the financial mess that we are today globally is that people do not understand the difference between currency and money. Currency is a medium of exchange, a unit of account. It is portable, durable, divisible, and something called fungible. Fungible means that each unit is the same as the next unit. A dollar in my pocket buys the same amount as a dollar in your pocket. Money is all of those things plus a store of value over a long period of time. Even financial planners, bankers, your accountant, they don't understand the difference between currency and money. The currency in your pocket is a medium of exchange. It's a unit of account because it's got numbers on it. It's somewhat durable, it's portable, it's divisible in that you can make change, and it's fungible. A dollar in my pocket buys the same amount as a dollar in your pocket. But because governments can print more and more and more of it and dilute the currency supply, it's continually transferring wealth out of your pocket, out of your bank account, to the government and to the banking system. The reason that gold and silver are the optimum form of money is because of their properties. It's an easy medium of exchange because gold and silver store a large amount of value in a very small area. It's a unit of account. Pure gold has the same value all over the planet. So an ounce of gold buys the same amount here in Egypt as it would in China or in the United States. It's durable. The same gold that Egyptians were using in trade 5,000 years ago is still here with us today. It does not corrode. It's divisible. You can make change with it. It's very portable. You could use something like oil as money. It's just that you can't carry around a barrel of oil on your back. It's fungible. Pure gold is the same wherever it is on Earth. Pure silver is the same wherever it is on Earth. It's limited in quantity. That's the reason that it maintains its purchasing power. Governments cannot print it. Over the last 5,000 years, only gold and silver have maintained their purchasing power. There have been thousands upon thousands of fiat currencies, currencies that are unbacked by gold or silver, and they have all gone to zero. It's a 100% failure rate.
Well, fiat currency, of course, is a currency that exists at the dictate or by fiat from a government. You see, they have their printing presses, and the paper money rolls off the printing presses. And then they give it the fiat designation, which makes the currency official. It's just worthless paper. But when Ben Bernanke gives it the special sign, and they have the cult meeting at the Federal Open Market Committee meetings, it suddenly becomes currency.
If you look at what's really going on, it's a con game. And so there's confidence. Well, the Federal Reserve is very forthright about what they're doing. If you read their websites, they'll tell you it's a confidence game. They tell you that there's no intrinsic value in their money. They'll tell you that they print it backed by absolutely nothing. They actually display all these facts. But if you tell somebody in the public that this stuff is created out of thin air, there's no backing whatsoever, it's absolutely worthless, it's about as valuable as monopoly money, they'll look at you like you're nuts.
Is there an example throughout history of a fiat currency, a piece of paper that's unbacked by anything, surviving?
Short answer, no. Long answer, no. And here's why. When Addison Wiggin took over at the Daily Record, when they got cranked up, Bill Warner asked him to catalog all of the fiat currencies throughout history and what happened to each of them. Addison dutifully went to work. Within a short period of time, he had gone through the alphabet. All the fiat currencies that started with the letter A were done. They all went to zero. He was halfway through the letter B, and all the fiat currencies that started with the letter B, and there were 600 of them in just the first letter and a half of the alphabet, and every single one of them went to zero. Every one. 600 fiat currencies that start with the letter A, and half of the ones that start with the letter B are 600 of these things. Not one ever came close. You think this one, the United States dollar, is going to be the first one after all that? I don't think so. No. No currency, fiat currency has ever survived. None.
The thing about money is there actually is a fairly well accepted definition of what money is. The question is, as you apply that definition to particular things that people claim to be money, do they fit the definition? We'll just take the paper dollar, for example. How well does it perform those functions? Well, store of value. The dollar has lost 95% of its purchasing power since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. So not very good as a store of value. One of the things I do is just a way to get the audience's attention is I have a slide, and there are 3 pictures on the slide. One is a pile of monopoly money. The other one is a pile of Federal Reserve notes, what Americans would call paper money. The other one is a solid gold American Eagle 1-ounce coin. And the title of the slide is, which of these is not like the other? And if you know the show Sesame Street, or you have children who watch it, it's one of the favorite vignettes in Sesame Street. And what it really is a kind of IQ test for 5-year-olds. They're supposed to look at the 3 things and look at characteristics and find the one that's not like the other. Well, I've shown this slide to groups of Ivy League university professors, and I've also shown it to children, kind of 5 years old, my nieces and nephews and so forth. And when the professors look at it, they say, well, Clearly, the dollars are not like the others because gold has no role as money, and monopoly money is junk, and the American dollar is a store of value, so that's not like the other. But the children look at it and they say, well, the gold coin is not like the other because the other two are just piles of paper, and the gold coin is clearly something different. So my question to the audience is, who's smarter, a 5-year-old or an Ivy League professor?
Before World War I, each note that a Treasury issued would say that there have been deposited with the United States Treasury $20 in gold coin payable to the bearer upon demand. The money was in the vault. The currency was a note they gave you that was a claim check, only a claim check on the money, the same as if you go to the dry cleaners and you give them your shirt and they give you a claim check for your shirt. The value is that shirt at the dry cleaners, not the piece of paper that says that you own that shirt. So our currency that circulated was the paper US dollars, and they were claim checks on money.
The next hidden secret is the difference between currency and money. Money must be a store of value and maintain its purchasing power over long periods of time. As we progress through this series, you'll learn that national currencies are really a tool used by the government and the financial sector to leech away your time and your freedom by stealing your purchasing power. So rather than storing your economic energy, currencies leak. Now compare that to the gold and silver the Egyptians were using. Like I started with, it still wasn't money because it wasn't interchangeable yet. But they were on the right track, as gold and silver have proven over thousands of years to be the ultimate store of value. Gold is only formed when a star explodes, a supernova, and it stays around forever. This is one of the properties that make it the ultimate money.
You know, people are amazed that after 5,000 years, the pyramids are still here. But what I'm more amazed at is that the currency that the people that built this were using, that currency, that gold and silver that they were using in trade on a daily basis, is still around today. It may have been melted down and re-refined, and it's in a coin or a bar or in some piece of jewelry, but it's still with us today, and it still purchases something.
Yes, it is the ultimate money because there is nothing else even in the same league. It's divisible, it's permanent, it's a store of value, it's a unit of account. It's got everything you want out of money, but it doesn't go away, and it can't be increased. That is what makes gold the most beautiful money of all. What more could you ask out of a money?
It keeps governments under control. You can maintain a solvent system. Governments don't like gold at present because they're getting away with the fiat currencies, and they'll do everything they can to discredit it as an asset class. I mean, my goodness, gold has outperformed the Dow Jones Industrial Average in each of the last 7 years, yet it's not considered a legitimate asset class. Why? Again, it's the fear that maybe gold will be imposed on the system, that it will constrain government ability to spend beyond its means.
They can't print it.
They can't print it, no.
The proper definition of inflation, I use Milton Friedman's definition. Inflation is an expansion of the currency supply. Deflation is a contraction of the currency supply. If you expand the currency supply, eventually prices will rise. And if you contract the currency supply, eventually prices will fall. This is a pool, but it's not a pool of water. This is the currency pool. And these are prices. And if you expand the currency supply, prices like a sponge in water have to rise to suck up the excess currency. Governments never stop printing more currency and adding currency to circulation. Therefore, prices keep on going up, not because the stuff that you're trying to buy is changing. The real estate doesn't change. What has changed is the currency purchases less and less. It's the currency going down, not prices going up.
The truth is, what we have that makes our world work right now is a big story. None of it's real. It's all just promises. And if you think about it, that's how currency began to work in the beginning. You know, before we had currency, we had barter. I'll give you 3 coconuts and you give me 4 fish, because that's kind of a fair exchange on coconuts to fish. But that got complicated, so we had to invent this thing called money to be a divisible, portable medium of exchange. And the challenge is that we lost that a long time ago when we lost having things of value be our currency. And now we have this thing called numbers and accounts. But trust me, it is not real. It's a big made-up story.
One of the biggest make-believe stories ever is called quantitative easing, which sounds complex, but it's really just a smoke and mirrors term for currency creation. QE started with the banking bailouts back in 2009. This currency was created out of thin air and then given to the banks, who paid themselves record bonuses in reward for crashing the world economy. This is a global phenomenon, but all you have to remember for now is that whether it's QE bailouts or stimulus programs, these are all just voodoo, hocus-pocus terms for increased currency creation.
I believe gold and silver will reassert themselves as money. And when they do, there just isn't enough. And their purchasing power is going to go up many, many, many times. Egypt is an amazing place. There's a franticness about it, and utter chaos, especially like the traffic. But when it comes to like all of the merchants that are trying to get every last dime out of you, you get fleeced to the point where you come back with an empty wallet, But you know what? They're amateurs compared to Wall Street.
In the past several years, I've spoken in many countries about the crisis that's coming, and a lot of people think that they're going to be okay in their country, that it's only going to happen to the United States or maybe the United States in Europe. But what they don't realize is that this is a global phenomenon. I got to show you something here. This is base currency in the United States. This is the number of paper dollars that exist, basically. It took 200 years to go from no dollars in existence to 825 billion. And then we had the bailouts, and then we had QE1, quantitative easing 1, then QE2, and then we had QE3, and then QE4, and then soon we're going to have QE57 and QE382. And it isn't just here. This is what the Canadian currency supply looks like. This is Australia, South Africa, Russia. Now, this starts out in just the year 2001, and this is like 18 times more currency in existence in a little over a decade. Here's Singapore, same story. Look at that, since the crisis, just bam. India, China, every government on the planet is doing this insane deficit spending and expanding their currency supplies, doing bailouts, and history shows that there is no example of this turning out well.
It is sometimes amazing that we haven't experienced more inflation than we have. If they keep expanding the money supply so vastly, why aren't our prices growing faster than they really are? And the answer is that a good chunk of the money that the Fed created has been shipped overseas. I remember early in my research, I heard this expression that the Americans have exported their inflation. I thought, what is that? How can you export your inflation? Put it in a box and send it out? What do you do? Well, now I understand. You export your inflation by simply sending all these dollars that you created to these other countries, and then they send you their refrigerators and their cars and whatever, their TV sets. So you get hardware, and they get little pieces of paper. It's a great deal for the American people for a while. For a while. Sooner or later, all of those pigeons come home to roost. When the time comes, as it looks like it's now coming, when the rest of the world is saying, we don't want to play this game anymore. Uncle Sam's dollars are just becoming worthless. There are too many of them. We've got to find something else other than American dollars. Then those dollars start to come back to America. People say, we don't want them anymore. What do we do with them? Once this revs up and we've got this little trickle of money coming back that we previously exported, once it becomes a flood and it starts to rush back, now we are getting our former exported inflation brought back to us, and then we'll see the quantity of money inside the United States grow much more rapidly even than the Federal Reserve can create it, because we're getting a previous money back. And that's when we will really see the tanking of the US dollar in terms of what it will buy.
During the second round of quantitative easing, global food prices went up 60%. And this created a humanitarian disaster for the 2 billion people on Earth who live on less than $2 a day. These people were hungry to start with. They became hungrier. Some of them started overthrowing their governments in North Africa and around the Middle East. So quantitative easing was the spark that ignited the Arab Spring. So that's it. When you create money, you get some sort of inflation. It just depends on where the inflation goes.
It's all going down, down, down. Peasants are reeling from a game of coins and crowns.
Given the premise that you have a permanent underclass or poor class, and how does inflation affect them disproportionately? It affects them basically in the percentage of their income that goes to food. And we see this as a ratio, and we know that there are some danger points. For example, in Egypt recently, once that ratio got to 40% of income going to food and the price of food rising due to inflation, when it got to 40%, that's historically a point where people actually stage a revolution. And that's exactly what we saw. The French Revolution, similarly, was all around the price of food getting to a certain critical point where people simply, the risk reward for revolution was favorable toward revolution.
When they print it up, then it all goes down.
Well, exactly right, because when you have a runaway inflation, it's punishing the very people who are most productive in society. In other words, the people that produce more than they consume and save the difference. The problem is that those productive people, the savers, save in their national currency. And unfortunately, the national currency is just a fiat piece of paper at this point. So when it's destroyed through runaway inflation, that $100,000 that you were hoping to retire on doesn't exist. And the things that you were going to buy with it and provide for others don't exist either. Now what are you going to do?
So that all seems pretty scary. However, this is going to happen, and you can only play the hand that you're dealt. But the great news is that gold and silver always end up doing an accounting of the expansion of the currency supplies. Basically, the will of the public and the free markets. When governments do this kind of stuff to their currency supply, they debase it. Eventually, it comes back in inflation. People sense the loss of their purchasing power. They rush back to gold and silver, and they bid the value of the gold and silver up in the country until it meets or exceeds the value of all the currency in circulation. This is a process that's been going on over and over again throughout history, except this time it's happening on a global scale. It has never before happened in all countries at once. And that means that this is the greatest wealth transfer in history. Therefore, it's the greatest opportunity in history, and it's not going to happen again in your lifetime.
So now we've learned that your true wealth is your time and your freedom. Money is a trading tool that stores the economic energy that is your time and freedom, whereas currencies leak them away. Gold and silver are the ultimate money simply because of their properties. Fiat currencies are based solely on confidence and always return to their intrinsic value of zero. Governments don't like gold because it imposes restraint. Rising prices are a symptom of an expanding currency supply, and gold and silver always account for an expanding currency supply.
So that's it for this episode. Join me.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed watching that little episode. Remember, I told you at the very beginning that you're not to get carried away with the suggestion of buying silver or gold, because as I'm going to explain to you, while that advice has merit, it is not ultimately the solution to the problem. He explained to you the basis for inflation, which is the expansion of the money supply, without it being backed by production. He didn't say the word production, but really that is the essence. I'm now going to explain in more details for you and pinpoint the key elements of the problem and help you to understand what we need to do now as a nation, as a people, to extricate ourselves from this continuous problem which we're having by design. So here goes. We're now going to walk through this carefully. Let me see if I can share my screen again. I didn't plan to do this, but I'm going to share my notes with you because I think it's easier to follow if you can read along with me and kind of see what I'm saying and see if it connects with you more. So I didn't plan to do this, but let me try to do this and see if it will work. All right, so let's try here. Let me see. I'm going to try to do this. Okay. All right, so now you're seeing my screen. So I'm going to walk you through some basic things that you ought to understand. So to understand inflation, you need to understand what money is versus currency. Money is anything which is generally accepted as a medium of exchange. It must be portable, meaning easily transportable. It must be durable, so it doesn't fade away quickly. You know, you can keep it for a long time and in its physical form or electronic form. It must be fungible, which means my $1 must buy the same amount of things as your $1. So every $1 is the same, every $10 is the same, every $100 is the same. It must be easily divisible into smaller denominations in order to make transactions, easy. So $100 is divisible into, say, $10, $25, $50, and so on. But it also has one key property which you must never forget. If something is really money, it will be a reliable store of value for a very long time. Example, gold and silver, as you saw in the what I just showed you. So gold and silver tends to hold on to their value for a long time, centuries, hundreds of years. So for something to be real money, it must have that property of being a store of value. And that value we're talking about is your work, your time, your effort, which you have poured out. And so it gives you money for that effort. Now, you don't want a situation where you work and let's say you produce $10,000 worth of work, and today I pay you $10,000. You don't want in a short time that $10,000 is not really worth $10,000. It's now worth $9,000 in terms of what you can buy, or it's worth $5,000 or $2,000 or whatever. You want it to be maintaining its purchasing power for a very long time. A very long time is something like decades, right? Not 1 year or 2 years. You want your money to hold its value. You shouldn't have to do anything else after you have earned that money. You should be able to go and dig a hole in the backyard, bury that money in the hole, and when you come back 10 years later and dig it up and take it out, it must still be able to buy the same amount of things, the same quality of things as it could 10 years before, or 20 years before, or 30 years before, or 40 years before. If it doesn't have that property, then it's not real money. Then what is it? It's currency. Currency is like money in every way, except that it is not a good store of economic value. So what we use today in Jamaica, the Jamaican dollar, that's currency. It is not money because it doesn't keep the economic value that you put out to get it. So currency, the Jamaican dollar, the US dollar, the Canadian dollar, the British pound, the Chinese yuan, all of these are fake money. They're not real money. They're currencies. They do not hold their initial value. The value is always leaking away, as was explained in the video. So while currency looks like money or is given to us as money, it's fake money. Currency is based on a monetary system, and this is key now. Currency is based on a monetary system, which by design causes it to lose its value if you do not constantly put it into circulation. The word currency comes from the word current, like the current in a river or a sea or electricity. It has to be moving for it to have value. So if your currency is put down, saved normally, you're not going to. The value of it will decline, and you have to now constantly be looking for ways to invest this money you have just earned in order for it to keep its value. Now that's really very difficult because here you are, you're an employee and you're working very hard and you've just worked very hard to earn $100,000. You've worked very hard to earn that. You cannot now just take that $100,000 and go and put it in the bank or put it in your vault or your safe or put it under your bed or dig a hole in the backyard and hide it. You can't just do that, because if you do that, when you come back, that $100,000 will be worth less. If you left it for a year, it might be worth at the end of the year $90,000. Another year, it might be worth $70,000. Another year, it might be worth $50,000. Another year, it might be worth $40,000. So that is really very difficult for you, because you have to find time as an employee to get up every morning, 9 to 5, so to speak, 1 hour maybe traveling to work, 1 hour traveling back home from work. So you've now spent 10 hours as an employee, okay? And then you might even carry homework with you. And at the end of that, you now have to find time and energy to be a super investor, to make sure that your money keeps pace or it's going to lose its value. This is very important for you to understand. Very, very important. Now, that means that the powers that be, they have designed the system so that you cannot keep up unless you are a financial wizard and spend a lot of time understanding money and how to invest in such an environment. The reason you must constantly invest your currency is because of what is called artificial inflation. Artificial inflation is created by a system called central banking, which I will explain in more detail. Central banking is where the global elites get your government to validate or legalize their representatives in many forms as a central authority over the nation's monetary policy. And this central authority then gets to decide what will be the nation's money supply, what will be the imposed interest rates, and what will be the exchange rates in question. Now, this is really, really significant. What they have done, they have taken away the responsibility of each and every citizen in a free market economy to make their own decisions about interest rates and exchange rates. They have taken away the authority of the government to be held accountable for these things, and they have given it to what they call a central bank. And the trick of this central bank is that they're really creating a communist-like entity. Yeah? Because the central bank now gets to centrally plan and manages the nation's money supply, as well as the nation's interest rate, as well as manipulating the exchange rate. And why are they doing this? They're not doing this on behalf of the people, even though they pretend to. They're managing this entire enterprise on behalf of the global oligarchs. And so these global oligarchs, for example, I'll give you an example of how that works in Jamaica. In Jamaica, You have the PSOJ, just one example. There are many groupings that they use, but the PSOJ in Jamaica, the private sector organization of Jamaica, and the elites that are a part of that group, they get our government to do things to benefit them because they control those political parties by funding them. Now, they get your government to make legislations to set up a central bank, which is like a communist central authority. They call this bank independent. What does that mean? Independent means that the bank is no longer controlled by the government, and it certainly is not controlled by the people of Jamaica. So it's controlled by somebody else, and they call this independence. It's not independence. What it is giving over the responsibility of monetary policy to a private body, a group of people working for the global oligarchs, and they will then have full control over the nation's money supply, interest rate, and exchange rate. This is powerful because anybody who manages a nation's money supply manages the economy and can cause the economy to go up or down by restricting the volume or supply of money or expanding the volume or supply of money. They can restrict interest rates to manipulate the activities and actions of businesses. They can prop up or release exchange rates to cause some industries to fail and some to succeed. They can actually manipulate government because the government has now lost control of one of its basic tools. It is no longer in a position to manage the money supply because it has given up that right by creating a so-called independent central bank. The global elites are working through the central banks of the world. So they have ensured that every country, or most countries around the world, has a central bank which is plugged into their system. And because it's plugged into their system, they are by extension sitting at the top of a pyramid and able to control the economy of every country around the world, or almost every country, because not every country is a part of it, but most are. So they can manipulate every country and by extension manipulate the world economy to create booms and busts as they see fit. These booms and busts are designed to benefit a few at the expense of the unsuspecting majority. For example, they can manipulate money supply and cause the stock market to go up, and then they can cause the stock market to come down. And in between those two cycles, the pump and the dump, you will have some people being made poor and a few people being made rich. For example, if you're a part of the inner circle and you can effectively time and know the maximum point of the pump, then you're able to pull and sell massive amount of your shares just before the period of the dump. And who will the dump affect? The vast number of citizens who merely buy mutual funds or what they call it now, 401k in the US or RRSP in Canada, trying to build your little pension nest egg, while these guys are systematically and fraudulently creating market booms and busts, pumps and dumps, and being able to steal your wealth through that. Not to mention that the very central bank system, by being able to dilute the money supply, is also stealing your wealth. Just think about it. Every time they put more money into circulation, which is not backed by production, they're simply stealing the wealth of those who have earned those money by actual work. So let me try to rephrase that. Let's say the entire population of Jamaica does $400 billion worth of work. And the Jamaican government then borrows some new money from the United States of America and pumps that money into our economy. Remember, that money was not earned by anybody. Nobody worked hard and produced that money here in Jamaica. So that dumping of US billions into our economy will simply now take away half of the value, right, whatever that is, or half, three quarters, depending on the amount. It will take away some of the value of existing monies which were earned by you and me. So that's how the value of your money goes down. And the way you experience that value decline is in price increases. There are other ways, which I'm going to explain shortly. So the global elites manipulate the global economy by increasing and decreasing money supply, interest rates, in order to secretly transfer wealth from the poor and the middle class to themselves via three methods: inflation or deflation and devaluation. A good example of this was the debt crisis in 2008, where the liquidity increases created the situation where housing prices through the debt-based model went through the roof, a bubble that they created by government policy. And then at the end of the day, when the crash came, all they did was to pump more money into the economy, but giving that money to the banking sector, which now today, we're feeling the effects of all of those so-called quantitative easings, plus what we just experienced through COVID, where they pumped more money into the economy without production. So while production was going down because of the lockdown, they were at the same time increasing the money supply by giving people so-called free money to stay home. But nothing is free. So all of that free money simply increased the money supply together with what has been happening from 2008, 2009, 2010, all the way to now. The build-up that has been happening. And so today now, the chicken come home to roost. But don't believe this is a true crisis. This is a manufactured crisis. This is not a case where, the powers that be didn't know what was happening. And by the powers that be, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about like our local government, because it is very likely and very possible that they have no idea what they're doing. They're just simply following the instructions of their colonial masters in order to get immediate benefits that they get, immediate benefits such as get more loans, get more grants, be in the good books of their colonial masters. So they don't care about, they don't understand, some of them. They have no idea what is really happening. Some of them, they're not that bright. They're not that smart. So they're simply doing things that they're being told to do by their foreign masters who say, okay, time to do this now, time to do that. And so they do these things, not really understanding the consequences in some cases of what it means, because they're not bright enough. They're not aware. They're not properly educated. So they're just following, you've got guys like, Clark, PhD. It doesn't mean they know anything. It simply means they know what the powers that be wants them to know in order for them to say some words to you and to regurgitate some points to you, make some announcements to you, but it doesn't mean they really understand or know what they're talking about. At that level, above them, they know. Now let's discuss what inflation is and how it robs you of your wealth. Okay? Inflation is a decrease in the value of your hard-earned currency. Government currently targets inflation to be between 4 and 6% per year. Now think about it carefully. The government has announced to you that they're targeting inflation of 4 to 6% per year. What this means is that they are telegraphing to you that they're going to steal 4 to 6% of your hard-earned money every single year. Now, if they steal 6% a year, that's 6% in year 1, 12% in year 2, 19% in year 3. you can see why you're not going to make it in life, why it's going to be very hard for you to be able to succeed, because as fast as you're working, they're planning and have announced to you that they're going to systematically steal 4 to 6% of your wealth. Okay? Now, it's worse than that. It's more than 6%, as you've seen now. And that's because while that's their so-called target, the powers that be above them have much greater abilities to stimulate inflation, which they have done, significantly stimulated inflation, and they're taking even more. But you might want to remember that when the government, under the cover of COVID, gave away the Bank of Jamaica to the banking cartels and gave them $20.6 billion of our money, that they told us they were doing this in order to ensure stability in the economy, to ensure that inflation is kept in check, and to ensure that we have stable employment and to promote growth in the economy. You remember that? You might not even have realized it, but it's on their website, GIS and so on, Bank of Jamaica. So they told us that by giving away the Bank of Jamaica, by making it independent, they were going to better protect us from inflation. Now look at where we are today. Have they really protected us from inflation? No. In fact, the very opposite of what they told us was going to happen has now happened. The Bank of Jamaica is now fully independent of the government, and inflation is through the roof. So you experience this loss of purchasing power in what we call inflation, which is in fact not a mere increasing prices, but rather a decrease in the value of your money. And since 1990 to now, that inflation is over 300%. And that is why many of you, hard as you try, you find that you are always behind. Life is always getting harder. The harder you work, the more you get closer to that so-called retirement age of 65, you only get more stressed out, and you can't figure out how you're going to survive when the day comes when you're no longer very employable. You can't work as hard as you were working at 35 and 45, and you're realizing now in your 50s or 60s that you have been duped. You don't know for sure how you have been duped, but you're feeling it every day. You feel it when your pension check comes and you cannot buy anything, even though you dutifully, no, I shouldn't say dutifully, you have been forced to contribute to the NIS program. Forced. So the government stick you up with a gun and took that money out of your wages and say that it's going to put this money aside for your retirement, your pension years. And then they give you back that money after they have now sucked much of the value out of it through inflation, devaluation, and exchange rate manipulation, right? So I want to now clarify for you the two types of inflation, because there are misunderstandings around this. So there are two types of inflation. There's what is called natural inflation, and then there's artificial inflation. Natural inflation is when a particular good or service is in short supply due to natural causes. Example, let's say you have a natural disaster, a massive hurricane or an earthquake or something like that, which wipes out farmers in general, or one set of farmers in particular, a major producer. When that happens, obviously the production level would have dropped because those farmers were wiped out, so their products are gone. Let's say the product is pumpkin, and you had a very, very wet period, and the pumpkins rot in the fields, couldn't come to maturity properly, and so on. So now you have a smaller supply of pumpkins, but the demand for pumpkin is still the same level. People still want to buy pumpkin to eat, but because of the natural disaster that wiped out much of the pumpkin production, there's too few pumpkin available in the market, and you have a lot of people who want to buy those few pumpkin. So they're going to bid up the price of pumpkin because it's scarce. So the scarcer pumpkin is, the higher the price will be. Those are natural inflation. That has nothing to do with government unless government caused the natural disaster, and which is possible as well if they make bad policies that, let's say, deforest an area and then cause a landslide or mudslide or whatever. But generally speaking, if it's a natural cause, something that is outside of any one of our human control, and it wipes out the production of a particular product or a set of products, then the price for those products are going to go up because the same demand is there, but there's less of that product. That is called natural inflation. Then you have what is called artificial inflation. Now, this is when government policy or monopolies cause a mismatch in supply and demand. Example, when central banks in the US and around the world, having the cooperation of the Jamaican government and similar governments to follow an economic model or a monetary system model, a debt-based currency model that is not backed by real productivity, that can create massive inflation. That's what we're feeling today. That's called artificial inflation. It's not natural. It's not caused by an act of God, if you will. It is caused by government policy, global and national. And remember, in national government, their responsibility, like our government in Jamaica, its responsibility should be to be knowledgeable about economics and understand finance and figure out how to insulate its country and its people from bad global policies. Yeah. So if you have governments around the world who are pursuing bad policies, we do not need to join them. We can decide that we're going to have good policies that creates an edge against inflation, imported inflation. So for example, we in Jamaica could have decided during the last crisis, the pandemic that we just experienced, we in Jamaica could have decided to follow the UIC policy. So the UIC said to the government when this thing was started, do not lock down our productive sectors. Let's do our best to learn and understand what is happening with this pandemic, but let us not lock down our production. Let us make sure that we keep all of our people working. Treat all workers as essential workers. Treat all industries as essential industries, and then focus on nations rather than locking down. Of course, the government did not follow the UIC policy. They simply followed the policy of the colonial masters, and they did to us what those masters did to their people, except that in some countries, they had governments with the ability to, do certain things to kind of soften the blow on their people at the time. Still foolish, but they could do some things. We in Jamaica didn't have many of those things. For example, look what they do with our children. We in Jamaica do not have high-speed internet fully around the country, fully operational. We don't have families that by nature normally just have regular internet access in their homes. We don't have very stable homes and families where mommy and daddy are at home and it's standard and they can work from home and stuff. We don't have a lot of those things here. But our government chose to implement policies which pretended as though we have that here. And so instead of protecting us from the problem that they claim they're protecting us from, they created more problems. So now we have a massive reduction in already a poor education system. We have now made it worse in terms of really putting our kids back 2 years and so on. So what I'm saying is the global inflation that we're experiencing It's not that we need to suffer this simply because it is global. We're suffering this because we don't have leaders and governments in Jamaica that knows how to say no to their global colonial masters and to build policies and programs that will defend and protect the interest of the Jamaican people. Yeah, I hope you understand what I'm saying. Now, so as I explained to you, what we're suffering is artificial inflation. Let's now look into it a little bit more by looking at how inflation really, really works a little bit more now. A price for any good or service will always rise if the supply decreases while the demand rises or stays the same. Okay? So a price for any goods or service will always rise if the supply decreases while the demand for that product or service remains the same or increases. So if the demand is increasing while the supply is decreasing, you're going to have an increase in price. Okay, that's just natural. There's nothing at all any government can do if it didn't create that problem. If it created that problem, all it's going to do now is to create other problems to try to solve it. So if you have a natural inflation, let's say where the supply of something decreases while the demand is rising or stays about the same, then that product is going to increase in price. If, however, by government policy, you have lockdowns that reduces the supply while people still have the same needs to be met, you have just now artificially created inflation by your lockdown measures or any other measure that you introduce that interrupts production. So, for example, a government policy that creates artificial barriers to entry into the market will artificially reduce the supply of that goods or service in the market and cause its price to be high. For example, if government cannot efficiently and effectively plan and approve housing development, you will have an undersupply of house, over demand, well not over, but whatever the demand is, and you're going to find the prices going higher. If the government impedes, for example, local production of the supplies you need to curtail the cost of housing in terms of manufacturing and production, the building of houses, you're going to find the price going up. So all of these things can be managed by good policies. The more the policies of the government are wrong, is the more you're going to suffer from inflation. Okay? Artificial inflation, because now government is the producer of that inflation. On the other hand, a price for any product will decrease if the demand for that product has decreased or if the supply of that product outpaces demand. So any product you have, whatever the product is, if the demand for that product is falling, the price is going to drop. So for example, if people used to ride horses and used to ride horse and carriages, and then a smart person comes along like Henry Ford and builds a beautiful car that is not too expensive but within the price point of saying buying a horse and buggy, or maybe slightly more, but given the utility of the car being a bit higher than that of a horse and buggy, meaning it can move faster, it's more reliable, maybe it's safer, maybe it protects you better from the elements, then more people will want to buy a car with all of those wonderful features, and they'll be less inclined to buy a horse and buggy. So those persons who used to breed horses for sale to many people who will want to ride around in a carriage with a horse will find that the demand for their horses will decrease, and so they're going to have to drop the prices of their horses and eventually go out of business. The same thing for those who are making carriages. If they don't change from making carriages to making cars, then less and less people want their carriages, and the carriages will go out of business. The blacksmith who used to make the horseshoe, he will have less and less people wanting horseshoes. He will have to reduce his prices to try to get people, and eventually he will go out of business. Nothing is wrong with this. This is normal. That is natural inflation in one area. That's the price of, the car is there. People want it, and it's offering value. So more people. So the price of the car may be higher than horse and buggy. Similarly, you're going to have deflation in the horse and buggy because less people want horse and buggy. That kind of arrangement is fine. That's how any economy works and should work. As the taste and demands of citizens change, the suppliers of goods and services must also change to match that. That's a free market economy. That is quite fine. That's how we're supposed to live. We're supposed to be trading value for value with each other. And as our perceptions of value changes, as our desire changes, as our innovation changes, then of course you're going to have price differentials, and some markets will decline and some markets will improve and increase, and we'll find a happy balance based on citizens trading freely with each other or with citizens of other countries. That is fine. If government, however, causes more money to enter the economy relative to the supply of goods and services, now you have a problem. Because now government now is messing with that beautiful economy that I'm talking about. You understand? So government now, instead of playing the role that government should play, because government's role is very clear. It's not clear to most of us because we weren't taught these things in school. We don't know what is the role of government. If you ask anybody, they're going to tell you all kinds of things. They're going to tell you government must take care of the people. Government must look out for the people. And so, no. Here's the role of government. The real, proper role of government is to protect your rights. That is the proper role of government. All the other things are secondary. And when I say protect your rights, what do I mean? You have 3 basic rights. Number 1, you have the right to life. That is given to you by your creator, not by any man, not by any government, not by any company. God, your creator, has given you the right to live by bestowing upon you life through your mother in concert with your father. You have been granted that right. You getting that right is not dependent on anybody granting it to you. That is a right from God. The second right that you have is the right to be free, liberty. So life, liberty. You have a right, a God-given right, a natural born right to be free, to be a free person, meaning nobody has the right to take away your life. Nobody has the right to enslave you. You should be free to do whatever you want with your life, with your time. And the third element of your rights is property rights, the right to own property. And the first property you own is yourself. You own you. Nobody owns you. You owns you. So those 3 rights are your fundamental right: life, liberty, and property. And by property, I mean anything that you earn or anything that is gifted to you justly. So anything that you acquire justly or anything which is given to you justly, and that includes what God has given to you, which is your body. And that is why the UIC fought so vehemently against the idea that government can decide what to put into your body. No government, no man, no woman, no authority at all has the right to violate your body. That's rape. So your right to life, liberty, and property right are unquestionable. So when you have good government now, when you have good government, not what we have now, which is a fake form of government, when you have good government, the government's job is to protect your life, your liberty, and your property. So they must provide a safe environment. They must really make sure the police are work, really make sure the justice system are work, really make sure so the environment is safe, clean, and orderly so you can enjoy your rights. So the government creates the environment for you to enjoy your life, your freedom or liberty, and your justly acquired property. Your property is your body, your property is the money you earn, your property is the things you buy with your money, and so on. It also includes the fact that once you are a Jamaican, you are entitled to a piece of the Jamaican property or the land. That's an entitlement by virtue of your birth. And that entitlement should pass down from family to family, generation to generation. Instead, what they have is a system where they have crown lands and government lands or whatever, and you are born you're born into a family without anything. And you now have to find a way to go and buy land or buy that property, which is wrong. But that's for another debate. I'm going to discuss that with you another time. But for this discussion, I wanted to make sure you understand that the role of government is to protect your rights, first and foremost. Now, when government doesn't protect your rights, it will do some dangerous things, like what this government and the government of the last 78 years in Jamaica has done to us. So when government causes more money to enter the economy relative to the supply of goods and services produced by the citizens, prices will rise and the value of the currency will fall. So whenever government fails to properly manage the money supply, when it gives up the responsibility to manage our money supply, it is creating the conditions to destroy your purchasing power, to destroy the value of your money. And that's what you have been suffering for years now, as you see the value of the Jamaican dollar continues to decline, because they are systematically stealing your money indirectly by inflation. Now, there's another way the government can cause inflation, not just by the introduction of new money into the economy that is not backed by productivity. It can also cause this by creating a country that is heavily import dependent. Because when you're heavily import dependent, you are a price taker, which means you have to pay whatever price the exporting countries are offering the product at. So the government, by bad policies, may cause us to import inflation into our own country. And that is the major form of inflation in Jamaica, the importation of inflation. Get that phrase in your head, Our government has created an economy that imports inflation into our economy. So let me give you a few examples as to what I mean by that to try and clarify, right? So if a country becomes heavily import dependent and prices of imports increases due to inflation in the exporting countries, example the USA, the importing country, for example Jamaica, will suffer higher prices, right? So if you're an import dependent country, because you're depending on import, if the exporting countries creates policies that cause their prices to shoot up very high, then you now in the importing country will be importing that inflation upon your citizens and creating pain and suffering. How could Jamaica have avoided that? Very easy. Of course, it's not easy to do it in a week or a month or a year or 2 years. You have to do that by having a government that understands economics, understands finance, and who is committed to protecting the interest of the people. So how do you do it? So Jamaica over the years have become heavily dependent on foreign oil. We have not had a government that has invested heavily in helping the Jamaican people to have a market economy that is based on us producing energy from different sources and having that mix of energy combined to reduce our dependence on foreign oil and to be more dependent on local production of energy. So for example, just imagine a Jamaica where every government building, every school, every hospital, every company, every home had solar panels on them. Just one example. Just imagine every single home across the country, every single building top across the country, or 80% or 60% or 50% of them had solar panels on them, and they were all connected to the national grid. And those who produce more energy than they consume would send that extra energy into the grid. And those who consumed more than they produce would be able to purchase that extra energy. And our oil bill, the importation of oil in our country, would drop significantly, which would bring down the cost of energy. This would also bring down the cost of manufacturing. This would also increase our competitiveness in exporting. And I'm just talking about one source of energy. Now, just imagine if we strategically harvested the wind. And just imagine if we strategically harvested geothermal energy. Now, Jamaica is a highly biodiverse environment, a lot of biomass is here. Just imagine if we harvested those biomass, the green plants, the vegetable peels, the sewage that we produce a lot of. Suppose we had harnessed those, properly manage our waste, so that the waste management, the geothermal energy, the solar energy, the wind energy, and in some cases where we can, hydro energy, and we made a full cogeneration system, and we're producing a massive amount of our own energy needs and not being so dependent on importing oil. Just imagine what that would do to our inflation rate. That would bring down inflation significantly because we would not have been importing inflation by importing so much foreign oil. That's just one example of how we could do this. Now, just imagine also if Jamaica had a leadership, had a government that was far-sighted enough to not have so many homes spread all over the place across the country using up farmlands, but those homes were concentrated in lovely high-rise buildings with beautiful parks and childcare centers and community centers, all the nice things you need to have a decent living, but they're concentrated in residential areas, away from the farmlands, and we turn those farmlands into massive organic farms, well-managed, what do you call them now, greenhouses, so we can manage temperature, manage the pest problem, manage the quality of nutrients, and bring out beautiful, succulent fruits and vegetables, and just a ton load of organics. And we became the leader in high quality organic foods and ship that around the world, meaning we're earning valuable foreign exchange, which will then keep our dollar stabilized against our trading partners because we are producing value as opposed to simply being more and more a consumption and dependent market. That again would have created a huge buffer for inflation and would block the import of inflation because of the strength of our output. Then just imagine if on top of those two things, we added a third element by the government, just doing its job of making sure we have a safe, clean, and orderly environment. Every single community in Jamaica now is pretty, smells good, feels good. The streets are well maintained. You have nicely cut, manicured grass and flowers and fruit trees and stuff adorning our communities and our landmass right across the country. Carefully planted and planned, looks very nice. Really a place that every tourist wants to be. But first and foremost, we have it and we're loving it. And now we expand our tourist industry from being the small little thing that we have made it and bust it out right across the country by having community tourism instead of the emphasis on all-inclusive, and bring the tourists into the entire expanse of our country, bringing that money into the hands of the citizens who are producing local foods and local entertainment, feeding and entertaining the people who come, and sharing our beautiful country with them, and keeping that money here, again, strengthening our economy even further and creating a massive buffer against inflation. You see what I'm talking about here? This is what you miss when you do not have good governance in a country. This is what you miss when you don't have a government that cares about the people, but are simply there to represent the interests of the colonial masters and the interest of the PSOJ oligarchs, because they are buying them out by funding their political parties instead of the party being owned by the people. And that is why I created the UIC, because I wanted Jamaica to have a political party that is owned by the people, not by the PSOJ and not by the colonial masters. We must have a Jamaica that is owned by us. And we can only do that if we first have a political party which is owned by us. You and me putting our $1, our $2, our $1,000, our $10,000, our 25 US, our 5 Canadian, or 25, we owning this party. So far, we're not doing as good as we need to know. We're doing better. Every year, we're getting more and more people buying into this idea. But we need 1,000 persons to buy into that idea. We need 1,000 persons to begin to donate 25 US dollars a month, or its equivalent, or whatever you can. But 1,000 on average, giving 25 US dollars a month, will make Jamaica, will make the UIC Jamaica's party, the people's party, because it's owned by me and you. Then we can implement what I'm talking about. But as long as we have two parties that are simply two sides of the same coin, controlled by the same master, the PSAJ oligarchs and the colonial masters, they will not do what we must do to defend the Jamaican dollar, to make our purchasing power stronger, and to protect the interest of the Jamaican people. And so that's why we're suffering. But let me go back to this inflation thing here. Jamaica has always suffered from inflation caused by government borrowing more than our local productive capacity. This drives up prices and it devalues our currency. Watch me carefully. Whenever the Jamaican government borrows money, okay, which does not increase our productivity. So they borrow money, which is spent, it is eaten, it is swallowed, it is used to buy more imported goods, but it does not increase our productive capacity. That drives up local prices and it devalues our currency, because we're simply taking in more US dollars into our economy that through borrowing, not through earning. So if we were to earn that US dollar, meaning if we were to produce something, and then when we produce the something, we sell it and get US dollar, that's good. But if all we did was to go out there and borrow and borrow and borrow, that is not good. You know that in your own life, you cannot continue to borrow. You can't continue to live on borrowing. The more you borrow is the weaker you become, unless you are borrowing more to expand your production. So let's say you right now you have a job and you're making $1.5 million a year, okay, here in Jamaica, which is nothing. That's about what? Maybe 10,000, maybe what? 13,000 Canadian, maybe, right? Nothing. That's peanuts. But let's say you're making $1.5 million a year here in Jamaica, and you borrowed $1.5 million from somebody, and you use that $1.5 million to buy a car, to go to work every day. Nothing has changed for the better. Now, yes, I know you now can get from your home to work by yourself, sitting in your car by yourself, driving to work. And on the weekends, you can take your family to the grocery store and buy groceries. And if you want to go somewhere, you can drive to go there. So you have made your life more pleasant. But what have you done? You're only making 1.5 million a year, and you have now borrowed 100% of your income to buy a car. And this car does nothing to increase your earning capacity. You're still making only $1.5 million a year, but now you have to pay back the 1.5 million you have borrowed. What will that do? It's going to cause you to have to cut something. Yeah? You now have to cut maybe the quality of the food you buy. So you're going to destroy your health. You maybe have to cut back on the kind of education you would have given your children, give them the materials they need. So you're gonna reduce your child's learning and productive capacity. You may even cut back on your living standard, meaning, what you would have had in your home, the kind of things you would have, you don't have that anymore. So your home starts to deteriorate, you can't maintain it. Your child education is compromised maybe, and your health is also compromised. So over time, that $1.5 million debt that you have taken on has only served to cripple you further. But suppose on the other hand, you borrowed that $1.5 million at say 10% interest rate, and you invested that in some kind of business, whatever it is, and that business produce a return on that 1.5 million of, let's say, 30% return per annum. So you're paying back the bank 10% per annum, and you're getting 20% on top, so you're net positive. That now allows you to still maintain your home because you're not spending money on debt that isn't productive, still maintain your health, and maybe, of course, continue to improve your child's education. And what if you see what I'm saying here? Now, the government of Jamaica, they have borrowed all this money, and our country is still mashed up. Our country is dirty. Our infrastructure is falling apart. Our education system is a wreck. Our police force is almost useless. Our justice system is no justice at all. People are taking matters into their own hands because they can't trust the justice system, they can't trust the police. And because of our bad roads, more people are dying from accidents on the road. It's very inefficient, so you can't do business in an efficient manner. Our government services are very ineffective. Customer service is bad, so you can't do business quick and earn fast and build and be productive. The environment is so unsafe, you can't plan and invest fast enough to build up your own economy because the government's bad policies are stifling your ability to grow. But yet still they're borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and then pushing that out to you by more and more taxations, more and more fees, more and more regulations, and that's suffocating you. So that kind of borrowing is actually undermining the Jamaican economy. And I hope you can understand what I'm saying here. I hope you can see it. Yeah? I hope you're understanding what I'm saying here. And so we continue to have a system of governance that actually terrorizes us as a people, a system that consistently takes away from us rather than add to us, a system that is depleting our energy and depleting our wealth through this artificial inflation, whether by them introducing more money by borrowing and diluting our earnings, or by creating an import-oriented economy that imports inflation like we're doing now from other countries. Yeah. So the way to avoid artificial inflation caused by borrowing is to not borrow from banks at interest, and instead take back our central bank from the so-called independent persons that we've now given it to. Take back our central bank. Stop borrowing money at interest from private banks, and borrow that money from ourselves by doing exactly what they do. They produce money out of thin air and lend it to the government at interest. So why not have a well-managed central bank where we simply borrow that money from ourselves by printing the money that we need, ensuring it's balanced with production, and not paying any interest on that. So you're saving the interest cost, you're managing your monetary system and your money supply, and you're avoiding all of the problems I just described. Yeah. That is how we can further strengthen our economic position, strengthen our dollar by bringing back the responsibility of monetary policy to government, and by having good governance to ensure that government doesn't behave irresponsibly when it has this responsibility. This will cut out the high interest cost on debt. It will reduce the amount of debt that we have, and in fact, there will be zero debt because we're going to be borrowing internally. And it would ensure that we maintain the purchasing power of our citizens by matching new money with new production so that the two are never out of sync. Low to no inflation, only natural inflation you have. The dollar would remain stable. The economy would grow because now we're going to also have an environment that is conducive to conducive to investment, and will allow our people to grow, to learn and grow, and become more and more innovative and productive in a global economy that thrives on innovation. Yeah, so that's what we need. Let me do a quick test. If you're following me, type yes in the comment section. Let me know you're following. Just type a quick yes that you're understanding. And this is not way over your head because I'm really trying to simplify it tonight. But I want to know that you're really following. I am a financial person. You know, I've studied economics, I've studied finance, I've studied accounting for a number of years. This is my field. This is what I specialize in. But I like to make it simple. I like to keep it simple. But sometimes I may get carried away and actually not keep it simple. So I have to check in with you on that. So thank you very much for that feedback. Now, moving along. The way to avoid artificial inflation is to, when it comes down to importation, is to ensure that we're exporting as much or more than we import. Yeah, so I told you that we can avoid one form of artificial inflation by not borrowing at interest, taking back our central bank, taking charge of our monetary policy again, restructuring our government the way the UIC prescribed, which is a good governance model. And you have heard me talk about that before. So we have a different model that is going to ensure proper checks and balances in government. But then you have the importation of inflation. The way to avoid the importation of inflation is to ensure that we become an export country that exports as much or more than what we import. And the way to do this is by developing solid competitive advantages. In the areas I mentioned, we have advantage in organic farming. We can do very well in that area. Now, of course, there are some things we need to do to make that happen, which I can explain to you in another session. I was going to say lecture. In another session, we can talk about how to do this, but there are some key sectors we have. Organic farming, we can capture the world in that area. Tourism, we can expand in that area. But there's a third element in addition to energy. So tourism, farming, energy, we can do some good work there. Water, we can do some great things with water. We have enough resources to become a net exporter of water, so we can do that too. But we also need to become a knowledge-based economy. Jamaicans are very bright naturally. We have the ability to do very, very well brain-wise. You see that in the scamming area, right? With the scammers, they're doing very, very well at it. It's bad, it's illegal, it's wrong, it's unethical, it's immoral, but they're showing us that they're not lacking in the ability to creatively find ways to extract money from other people. What we have to do now is to build an environment that channels that energy into legitimate ways of making a high income. You can't ask them to settle for low income subsistence farming and all of that. They don't want that, and they shouldn't want that. So we need to change our education model so that we're really bringing out the best in our people. We cannot continue the same old colonial model of trying to create workers. laborers, unthinking employees who just follow orders. We need to change our education model in order to bring out a new economic model. And so that education model must be one where we really develop the whole person, make sure our students understand themselves, understand human behavior, and understand money, the economics of money, the science of money, all the elements that will allow them to be effective. Mirror that, or marry that rather, with a system of interdisciplinary study, where when you're studying, you're not studying in isolation, math and language and physics and chemistry. Instead, you're studying in an integrated way and in a applied way. So not just theoretical, but your theory is being connected with application, so that we can start producing innovators, creators who have the competencies to create well. We have many creators in Jamaica, but they can't create well because they weren't educated well. They weren't educated in the tools as to how to produce things like, solid state electronics, microtechnology, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, coding at so many different levels. So we need to change our brand of education to a more engaging one. Every time I go to a school to speak, I go around and check what's in the school system, what are they doing in the school, and the kids are bored stiff. Our education model is antiquated. It is not meeting the needs of the kind of generation we have today. The faster pace, they need quick feedback. They need very engaging and stimulating activities that are built around practical things that allows them to quickly convert knowledge into reality, into products, into new ideas, innovation. So you find that when you go to these schools, the computer lab is where most of the kids want to be. One, it's air conditioned. That's a plus. They're around technology and they're feeling more empowered. Change the model. Get our kids to be doing hands-on things where the theory is quickly converted into an applied solution, and then link that quickly with industry, and then marry that with the UIC's youth employment solution, where every child, as soon as they finish high school and even before, they move into an apprenticeship program where they're learning on the job. You want them in our science labs. You want them in our various manufacturing concerns and industries. You want them in our financial sectors and understanding, the different financial products and why and how. You want them in our maritime institute. You want them in the police, in the army. You want them to be fully engaged and not available to the gangs and the criminals. Yeah. So we have a way, we can really fix this, and we can do it very quickly, but we have to start realizing that we can't continue with the same old. Yeah. We need to get out of this same old situation we have here. And the UIC has taken the time to build all these solutions, or education solution, or economic solution, or governance solution. We have the things the country needs right now. But we can't get it done without you, because the powers that be are bent on blocking us. They block us from a bank account. We can't get a commercial bank account. They block us from regular media. We can't get regular coverage on radio and TV. They block us from paper. They block us from funding, of course, because they give the funding to the other two. So we know that the only way we're going to get to where we need to get to is if you jump on board. If all of us jump on board and say, we're going to own this thing. We're going to tell everybody about the UIC. We're going to share every video. We're going to subscribe to UIC Liberty TV and all of the platforms, the internet, the website, so I can get the letters and I can get the newsletters and the communications. I'm going to tell my family and friends. I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to just get involved and take over this thing, become a part of this thing here, and become really engaged in getting Jamaicans around the world to be a part of the UIC. But continuing, our government of the last 78 years failed to build an inflation-resilient economy. by choosing instead to bind us to a fraudulent monetary system that undermines our economy and our lives. I hope you see that. They have used the last 78 years to bind us to a fraudulent monetary system that continues to weaken our economy and undermine our people, while systematically selling out all of our assets one by one by one by one. If we allow these two parties to continue on the same trajectory, they're going to ensure that we, the people of Jamaica, become tenants in our own country. They're going to make sure that we become tenants in our own country by systematically selling everything out while ravishing in our own economy, depleting our purchasing power, destroying our export potentials, blocking us on every side with fraudulent regulations designed to kill small businesses and to protect big businesses. We must act fast to stop them from completely decimating our economy as individuals. So that's what they've done for 78 years. So what should we do? We must embrace the UIC's good governance model. That's the only way we're going to have a safe, clean, and orderly society that brings out the best in its people. No other way. It's when we embrace a governance model, it's when accountable for protecting the life, the liberty, and the property rights of every citizen equally. It's only when we do that that Jamaica is going to prosper and blossom and do very well. When we embrace the UIC's good governance model that puts you at the top, every single citizen at the top, no queen, no foreigners, no whatever, or no government, you, the person, every individual as a sovereign soul, worthy of being respected and protected and served by its government. When we do that, this will inspire local investment. It will eliminate artificial inflation, and it will raise our standard of living to a standard, in my opinion, that will be higher than that of even Singapore, a country which I admire greatly for having done much of what I'm talking about. All that I've told you is not pie in the sky or difficult. It's not difficult. It's not easy because of the resistance we're going to get, but it is something we can do. We have the capacity to create a new Jamaica. We have the capacity to create one Jamaica, a Jamaica where every one of us have equal opportunity, a Jamaica where every one of us can live, earn, and retire with dignity right here and not have to go abroad in order to enjoy some decent standard of living. We can create one Jamaica, and the only way for us to do that is for us to get rid of this partisan divide and come together as one. We are stronger together. We are weak as long as we remain in green or orange camp and fighting for scarce benefits and spoil. That is making us weak. I invite you, all Jamaicans, wherever you are, to on this day, erase from your mind your love of party, and for the first time in your life, decide that your love is for a Jamaica that is a true republic, that protects the rights and freedom of every citizen equally, that gives every Jamaican right here in Jamaica the full opportunity to realize their full potential. Can we do this? I believe we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we must. And yes, we will. I've gone too long on this live, but let me take some questions now before I close. 5 minutes of questions. Any questions from anyone? I'm sure I missed some in the comments. I couldn't be responding to all of them at the same time, but I had to share this with you. Anybody have any questions or comments that you want to make before we close out tonight? I hope you were able to understand this inflation thing. Let me know if do you have a better understanding now of inflation and money versus currency? Has this been a useful exercise for you? Let me know, please. If you have learned more about inflation, if you understand it better now, if you know why we're having the problems we're having and how we can go about resolving it, just type a yes in the box so I know that you get it. If you didn't get it, if you think it was kind of not so helpful, put a no in the box so I can learn and improve in the processing. So let me know if you found this to be a useful discussion that helped your understanding of inflation. Type a yes in the chat so I can understand and learn from you, because we're in this together, So feedback is very important. And if I'm not giving you what you need, then you have to let me know so that I can seek to adjust. I know it was long. It's 1 hour and 51 minutes. I didn't realize I was just going away at it. But thank you for your patience. Somebody says, how can our government use borrowed funds to pay our teachers and police officers? Exactly. You can't be borrowing money to pay for basic services, because it's we the people who should pay for those basic services. When you understand the role of taxation is very simple. We should pay just enough in taxes for the government to do the work it should do. But instead, what we're paying for with our taxes is corruption and waste, mismanagement, as opposed to just getting a government that is small enough, effective enough, efficient enough to give us what we need at a low cost. Yeah. Dion Campbell says, to make sure I'm in the next election. I will be there. The only question is, Dion, is if I'm going to get the funding I need to compete effectively. So I need your help to compete, because if you're on the ballot but you don't have the money to communicate effectively, then you'll just be on the ballot and you get 100 votes or 50 votes or 25 votes. We need more than that. We need a landslide in the next election. So I need your help for that. Yeah. Amanda says, make sure when you have any big gatherings, you pass around the collection bucket. Okay, good thought. Thank you. When we keep the money from tourism in the country, won't that create a problem like carrying by inflation? No, man. No. Cool guy. The money from tourism, remember, that's money in exchange for a product, eh? So that doesn't create inflation. So if somebody comes to Jamaica and pay us $1,000 for accommodation and meals, we would have provided accommodation and meals. And if they pay another $500 for entertainment, we would have provided entertainment. So it's because that money is being spent on production, that's not going to create inflation. What it's going to do is increase our foreign earnings, so that we can then, when we're buying stuff from overseas, we're sending money that we earn from overseas back overseas to buy something from overseas. So that will create a balance and your dollar will be stabilized. The instability comes when you are importing, whether by borrowing to import, or you're importing much of what you need for your local production, and that creates an imbalance. Yep. The corrupt thief in government, says somebody here, hold the police and teachers a whole heap of money. Yep. Thank you. All right. And they have to buy food and phone credit, wicked evil. So somebody is talking here, Janet, I think. Yes. All right. Okay, thank you very much for that suggestion as well about using a different camera for the live, and so we can not have the interruption. I hope we didn't have any interruptions today. I didn't see any. how will we be impacted by a collapse in the U.S. economy and the U.S. dollar? Severely, Beverly. A collapse in the U.S. economy means less remittances. Jamaica is very remittance dependent. That is one of our major foreign exchange inflow is remittance. So if the American economy goes into recession, many Jamaicans are going to suffer and starve because they're not. That's where they get their money from. They don't get their money from going to a job or a business. They get their money from remittances. So that's going to cause, many persons will suffer from that. Similarly, if you have a recession in the U.S., you will have less tourist traffic to Jamaica, less tourist spending. So that again will also reduce our income. The tourist dollar will drop, remittances will drop, and any export that we do otherwise will also drop as well. Also remember, a lot of what we do is imported. And so if you have high inflation in the US, when we have to buy those things, the inflation is going to be, the cost of that is higher, which will push up our inflation here. The oil that we use to run, JPS and so on, that's going to be higher. So our JPS bill is going to go up. The oil we use to distribute things around the country, that will go up. So the cost of fuel will push up the cost of all other items as well. So it's going to be really miserable the more the U.S. falls into a recession, because we're going to fall in it too, because our government has not prepared us to be resilient under those circumstances. 80% of what Jamaica makes from tourism goes back out of the country. That's correct. I don't know the exact percentage, but that's fairly correct, because we actually do not use a lot of our own stuff to serve our tourist sector. And many of our hotels and stuff are owned by foreigners, which would normally want to send that money out of the country as well. Can we sponsor local events for candidates? Absolutely, Robin. You can sponsor any event at all for candidates. Just let us know what you want to sponsor, and let's coordinate it through the main UIC accounts so that we can keep proper control and proper accountability. Okay? All right. What else do we have here? What else did I miss? Let's see. Here. That's correct, Mitzi. The ball is in the hand of the Jamaican people. Now, many Jamaicans still don't know much about the UIC, because we don't have coverage on the regular media. So for them to hear, we all have to tell them. Word of mouth, WhatsApp messages, emails, social media spreading it. So please, everyone, get involved and let's spread this right across the country and the world. All right, so I'm going to leave you all now. Thank you so much for being here again tonight, and we shall talk again soon. All the best. Take care.